This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The World Health Organization seeks to secure an initial 230 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines for Africa. The 75th anniversary of the end of World War II is marked across the world. And how a Tunisian violinist is dealing with performance disruptions caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Bits. African nations urged to weigh the cost versus benefit of credit suspension programs. An outrage in Zimbabwe following the signing of an agreement with white farmers who lost their land. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. We begin with efforts to develop a vaccine for the coronavirus. The World Health Organization says it hopes to secure 230 million doses of any COVID-19 vaccine, specifically for Africa. Only 2 potential COVID-19 vaccines are being tested on the continent. Meanwhile, the Global Vaccine Allocation Plan, also known as COVAX, aims to help buy and fairly distribute 2 billion doses of approved vaccines by the end of 2021. Officials from the WHO say the initial batch will cover around 20% of the African population, giving priority to those who are on the front line, like healthcare workers, then expanding to cover vulnerable groups. During an online news conference, the director of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, John Nkengasong, said talks with COVAX will supplement other negotiations with nations such as China, Canada and the United States over securing access to potential COVID-19 jabs. Meanwhile, an independent panel set up to review the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic says it's preparing to ask the World Health Organization some hard questions. According to its co-chairs, the board has been promised access to WHO's records. It plans to examine the actions of the organization and its timelines with regards to containing the coronavirus pandemic. An interim report is then scheduled to be presented to an annual meeting of health ministers in November, followed by a detailed record in May 2021. The review is in line with a resolution adopted by member states earlier this year, calling for an evaluation of the global response. More than 26 million people have been infected with the coronavirus, and nearly 1 million have succumbed to the disease.
It's a strong panel poised to ask the hard questions. We look forward to a period of intense work together at a key moment in history. We must honor the more than 25.6 million people known to have contracted the disease and the 850,000 and counting who have died from COVID-19.
For decision makers, we may ask what kept them awake at night and what actions made them sleep a little better. We'll explore the impact on people's health and health systems. Why have certain groups, namely the poorest, people of colour and the elderly, been more affected than others? For those who were managing an emergency ward, what made the biggest difference to their patients? What more did they need? What more could they just not do?
Well, coming to the situation in Africa now, Ghana was initially widely applauded for its coronavirus response, but the country is now grappling with a fresh spike in cases. Health authorities are worried that the public is no longer taking the threat posed by the virus seriously enough. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports from Accra.
When Ghana went into lockdown in March, the wearing of face masks and hand washing became the norm. But as restrictions are eased slowly, people appear to be dropping their guard. At markets in Accra, some people disregard safe distancing altogether and are not wearing face masks.
The virus, they are not in the sky. So when I'm on a special place like this, I can just decide to breathe small. Yes, that's why I have it in a pocket. Yeah, I have it like this. I have it. Yeah, so when I'm on a crowded place, like going to the station like this, I have to wear it.
The World Health Organization says the wearing of face masks helped to limit the spread of COVID-19, but some people in Ghana still question whether the virus is real and don't see the need to cover up.
Accra is still the epicenter of coronavirus infections in Ghana, although active cases have declined. A survey by the Ghana Health Service shows that only 14.4% of the population in the region wear face masks. So experts are warning of a surge of infections if safety measures are not strictly enforced.
Some health experts say Ghana is not recording an exponential increase in active cases of COVID-19 because it has stopped contact tracing, and this could be sending a wrong message to people, which is why they have relaxed.
The president has also conceded that now significant numbers of people are disregarding the protocols, and that is very dangerous to our fight to contain the spread. The figures are really giving the public a lot of confidence that the disease is on the decline. But in actual sense, the disease is now within the community and is inflicting more harm than healing.
Ghana says it will start punishing people who flout the COVID-19 safety measures. Offenders will face a jail term of between 4 and 10 years or pay a fine of between $2,000 and $10,000.
Let me remind those amongst us who want to continue to disregard these protocols that severe sanctions exist in our laws for such persons who will want to endanger the rest of the population through their actions and negligence. The law enforcement agencies will, where necessary, apply these measures without fear or favor.
The Ghana Health Service says it will intensify campaigns to promote the wearing of face masks to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Health experts also want people to be taught how to wear the face mask correctly, as many people choose to wear it under their chin instead of using it to cover their nose and mouth. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Meanwhile, South Africa's National Health Department has launched a new mobile application to strengthen its digital contact tracing efforts. COVID Alert SA is a free exposure notification app. By tracking smartphone proximity, the app is able to warn users who could have been exposed to someone who has COVID-19. CGTN's Lindy Mtongana explains.
South Africa has been using manual contact tracing methods like home visits and phone calls to alert those known to have been exposed to a COVID-19 patient. But there's a new weapon that has been unleashed now in the fight against COVID-19, an app called COVID Alert SA. It provides another crucial layer to contact tracing.
One of the great challenges that we have is we often move around but have no idea about the people that we're interacting with and what risk that may pose. So to combat the break in the chain of transmission, as we interact with people, we need to have some sense about who it is that may potentially have COVID and may be able to transmit it to us.
When a user tests positive, they are requested to report their diagnosis anonymously in the app. All other users with whom they have been in contact for the past 14 days will immediately be notified of their exposure. COVID Alert SA relies on Bluetooth technology to track proximity between smartphones. It operates on an entirely anonymous basis with no identifiers.
It's basically an automated notification of proximity to a person infected with COVID. So if you're in contact with somebody who's infected, it will alert you. It will also provide privacy prioritized and protected so that your information is not shared with other people.
I have been through the app in detail with the developers, and I am entirely satisfied that it is sufficiently anonymized to make anybody who is nervous about their privacy infringement not be worried, because it is anonymized. They don't collect any of your personal information. No name, no email address, no phone number, no location information is collected or stored.
Downloading the app requires 3 megabytes. Thereafter, it is zero rated, meaning it will not cost you anything to use. It is available on Google Play and iStore, and developers are currently looking at other platforms to ensure that it is available there as well. Government believes that this latest invention provides additional armament to achieve suppression of the virus and prevent outbreaks from occurring again by eliminating the time-consuming steps it takes to achieve contact tracing manually.
It's a time now where South Africans must take charge, but also it's up to them now to actually be part of the solution in terms of ensuring that we are able to contain the infections.
The COVID Alert SA app is now available for free download. Yolisa Njomela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, health workers in Uganda are sounding the alarm over an increase in mental health cases, which they say are linked to the coronavirus pandemic. The country's national referral hospital, WWII, has recorded about 1,500 cases over the past 4 months. That's up from just 500 before the national lockdown. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga brings us this report.
Jackie Mirembe, not her real name, is attending counseling sessions at Break Free Teen, a rehabilitation center in the suburbs of Kampala. Her family has been going through hard times due to the impact of COVID-19. Even basic necessities became unaffordable when the family's business collapsed.
I sit there, you see me crying for no good reason, but I cry. Then someone says, "What has happened to you?" Tell him nothing, but then I'm crying, real tears.
Jack is not the only one seeking treatment at this center. Aaron Mukalazi, not his real name, suffered the onset of depression because of stress at home. The lockdowns trapped Aaron's father in Kenya, and his absence was hard on the family. 16-year-old Aaron Mukalazi was forced to start fending for the family.
She had sent me to go to look for money. Then she quarreled a lot. I asked myself, why is she quarreling when she's the same person who sent me to go look for money, and now she's saying go fetch water? That is conflicting loyalty, and I felt depressed, really depressed, when I don't want to look at anybody.
Counseling psychologists say there are certain identifiable signs of mental illness.
They are, kind of spaced out. They don't concentrate on anything. They visibly worried and teary and sad. Those are some of the signs of someone being mentally affected.
Health experts are especially concerned about a rise in mental illness among the elderly.
We've had increased numbers of people coming up with stress-related illnesses, anxiety, depression. Then even admissions for substance use dependency has really gone up. We have a growing number of people that are resorting to alcohol, drugs in order to cope with the stress related to COVID.
Experts in mental health say stressful situations can cause changes in sleep and eating patterns, which can trigger chronic health problems. They are now encouraging patients with these symptoms to seek treatment before they become severe. Mental health experts are trying to encourage people who have recently lost their jobs to find other sources of income.
We're trying to help people understand is that they should come up with alternative ways of either making money, of living, basically to embrace the new normal.
The Uganda government is also extending mental health services to patients at home through phone calls and delivering drugs to those already on treatment. It is hoped that this kind of support will help people like Jackie Mirembe to cope with the stress related to COVID-19. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, let's turn our attention to news coming out of Beirut now, where rescue crews are searching through the rubble for possible blast survivors after scanners detected a pulse. Now, this comes a month after the massive explosion at the city port sent shockwaves through the Lebanese capital, killing 191 people. The rescue team, made up of Lebanese and Chilean workers, has been combing through the rubble in the blast-hit Gameze neighborhood. According to the city's governor, sniffer dogs responded to a scent from one of the collapsed buildings. The rescue team is hopeful the search will be fruitful. The United Nations peacekeeping mission has condemned an attack on students sitting final exams in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. A militia group attacked the school and raped some of the girls, forcing 700 students and teachers to flee the school. CGTN's Chris Ochamrenga has more from Kinshasa.
Fighting broke out near a school in the DRC's Haut-Uele province. Local authorities say the attackers descended on the school and raped girls. The students had returned to sit their final exams. The attack happened just 5 days after 2 students were killed in clashes between Congolese troops and an armed group in the Masisi area of North Kivu province. The special representative of the UN Secretary General to the DRC, Leila Zerogi, has condemned the attacks.
I would like to extend my condolences to the families of the students who were killed in Masisi. It was a senseless and unacceptable act. Those innocent students had returned to sit their final exams after the COVID-19 restrictions were lifted.
The government says it has launched an investigation to bring the perpetrators to justice after the attack on Monday. In 2016, it committed to protect students in conflict zones by signing the Declaration on Safe Schools. The east of the DRC is teeming with armed groups fighting over land, political representation, and the control of mining sites. The UN has a 16,000-strong peacekeeping force that supports the Congolese army to protect civilians, but the attacks have continued to happen. Chris Ochamrenga, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. The 75th anniversary of the end of World War II is marked across the world. And we tell you how a Tunisian violinist is coping with performance disruptions caused by COVID-19.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Well, the world is marking the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II, but the occasion has additional significance for China. Chinese President Xi Jinping and other senior officials attended a commemoration event and a symposium in Beijing to mark the 75th anniversary of the Chinese people's victory in the war of resistance against Japanese aggression. CGTN's Su Yuting has the story.
In an address, President Xi Jinping praised the spirit of the Chinese people, saying their resolve can help them overcome all difficulties.
我代表中共中央
On behalf of the CPC Central Committee, the National People's Congress, the State Council, the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, and the Central Military Commission, I would like to pay high tribute to the old soldiers, old comrades, and patriots who participated in the war, and to the Chinese people at home and abroad who have made historical contributions to the Chinese people's victory in the war of resistance against Japanese aggression.
President Xi Jinping said during the course of the war, Chinese people demonstrate their solid patriotism, preserving belief that justice will ultimately triumph. He said such a spirit was to be treasured and that it would help toward the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. In the morning, President Xi and other senior officials also commemorated China's fallen heroes in the war. At the Museum of the Chinese People's War of Resistance against the Japanese aggression, veterans, relatives of martyrs, foreign friends, and representatives from all walks of life gathered. They sang the national anthem, paid a silent tribute, and laid floral baskets to those who sacrificed their lives in the war. Over a 14-year period, China lost over 35 million soldiers and civilians and came with enormous economic damage. The Chinese people have made tremendous sacrifices and great contributions to the victory of the world anti-fascist war. And for the first time in a century, the Chinese people has won the complete victory of its resistance against foreign aggression. And it's also helped secure the world peace and justice. We remember history here not to prolong the hatred, but to learn from its lessons, cherish peace, and create a better future. Su Yuting, CGTN, Beijing.
Here in Kenya, the discovery of a mysterious tunnel in the Rift Valley region has caused excitement among locals and historians. The tunnel is reported to have been built in the 1940s during the Second World War. Its chambers may have acted as shelters or stores for British soldiers. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabo reports on that find.
From afar, it looks like an old well with crumbling walls, but there's more to it than that. This hole in the earth runs deep and is mysterious, like its history. It's part of a tunnel believed to have been constructed during the Second World War. Residents of Mariashoni, a forest area in Kenya's Rift Valley region, have known of the tunnel from childhood. Theories about its origins swirl around. Locals believe the Italians built it in the 1940s with the help of workers ferried from Western Kenya.
We weren't born by the time it was built because I was born in 1958 and our parents said this tunnel was completed in 1944. So we don't even know when the construction started. But we know those who built it came from Italy.
But the Italians may not have built it for themselves. Italian forces invaded Ethiopia in May 1936 in their bid to establish Italian East Africa. British allies, however, fought against and defeated the Italians in the East African Campaign as part of World War II between June 1940 and November 1941. The captured Italian prisoners are believed to have constructed the tunnel as well as a nearby church. And now locals are unearthing pieces of this history. It is hard to ascertain just how long the tunnel is, as it is blocked in some areas, making it impassable. Locals who have explored it, however, say there are chambers inside.
When we were children, we made it all the way to a place where there was a room like a bedroom, with a wheel that you could turn.
The National Museums of Kenya says it would like to study the tunnel in order to establish its history. If confirmed to have been a bomb shelter or a store during the Second World War, it would be an exciting find, one that would put the little village on the map.
We would like to collaborate with the government in building a cultural center where the visitors from far and wide could learn more and locals could benefit.
Today, the floors of the tunnel are flooded, and only the most adventurous visit the crumbling ruins that could be another lost chapter in the books of history to be preserved for the edification of future generations. Wilkista Nyabo, CGTN.
Now, many Africans were involved in the Second World War, defending the interests of their colonial masters. As CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy reports, more than 1 million African soldiers were in action during World War II.
It was a war away from home, driven by issues that most of the over 1 million Africans who were conscripted had little or nothing to do with. Many experienced prejudice during the war and little gratitude or compensation for their services afterwards.
Many lost their land. Many sacrificed their families, and the life they came back to after the war was worse than how they had left to the war.
These men sacrificed their lives to defend a distant land, a land they had until then never trod, a land they marked with their blood.
To date, this sacrifice remains largely forgotten.
During the war, we find that they served alongside the whites, and therefore we find that they were not equally compensated. The Africans got like a third of what the whites were getting, and therefore there was a discrimination in the compensation at that time.
In Africa, Kenya's central role as the home of the East African Force, the Eastern Fleet, and also has a war front with Italy, saw thousands of men enlisted and died for a cause they didn't necessarily believe in. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Britain says it will not fully compensate African soldiers who fought on its side during World War II. This after it emerged that the African soldiers who fought received 2/3 less pay than their British contemporaries. Well, Kirsten Yabo caught up with one World War II veteran in the wake of that announcement.
He speaks with an animated energy which belies his age. In 1943, when Kennedy was just 17, he left high school in central Kenya to join the King's African Rifles, a battalion drawn from a section of Britain's colonies. Over 500,000 African troops fought for Britain in the Second World War. Kennedy was one of them.
We had a school principal called Lindy. He was British. Different schools would receive deployment letters from Britain, and the students would join the battalions. So when we got ours, we left school.
Kennedy's battalion was primarily stationed in Burma, where they supported the troops battling the Japanese.
We had special planes that we used to travel. Mount Kenya was our headquarters. So when the people in the battlefields found captives or anything, they would come to us and we would relay the message.
He still remembers the signals.
I remember everything. A to Z, 1 to 10.
Either splashing or...
It's been over 70 years since the Kenyans who went to fight in the Second World War returned to the country, and among survivors, the memories are still clear, and some of them say that those events changed the course of their lives forever. When Kenya gained its independence, Kennedy used his skills to work for the Kenyan government, but he is the last of a dying breed. Every year, the number of veterans dwindles further. Though his 11 children are all grown up, the stipend Kennedy sometimes receives from the British government goes a long way. However, a recent report revealed that the African soldiers only received 1/3 of the reward given to their counterparts. It dealt a blow to the survivors, many of whom have little to show for their sacrifice. Those who remain, however, keep telling their stories. They may not have much, but they take comfort in the thought that their names have not been forgotten. Wilkes Anyabwa, CGTN.
In other news, South Sudan's government is urging international partners to support the implementation of a peace deal for Sudan. Juba says the agreement in Sudan will help consolidate peace for the entire Horn of Africa region. CGTN's Patrick Oyet has more.
South Sudan has mediated a deal to end 17 years of conflict in Sudan's regions of Darfur, South Kordofan and Blue Nile.
The first thing is that we know Sudan. South Sudan and Sudan used to be one country. Even if we separated and now we are in two different countries, we are still neighbors. We know the root causes of the conflicts in Sudan. That knowledge of Sudan has helped us to mediate in the peace talks.
South Sudan is, however, struggling to implement its own peace deal reached after a civil war that began in 2013. Implementation of a 2018 peace agreement is slow, and that could lead to more violence, according to the African Union body monitoring the deal's progress. There are armed groups that are not part of the peace agreement and are still fighting the current government. Civil societies in South Sudan say Juba needs to do more.
South Sudan is fostering peace, and there is no peace in South Sudan. And for me, this is a moment that, again, we need to refer to South Sudanese leaders and ask them to have the political will, the commitment to be able to give concessions and compromises, necessary compromises, and realize peace for the people of South Sudan.
Sudan's peace deal also still faces some challenges. There are two groups who have opted out of the peace agreement. Their leaders are refusing their armies to be integrated into Sudan's armed forces, but the parties to the agreement say they are hopeful that the deal signed in Juba marks the end of war in Sudan.
This is a historical agreement that's meant to give us, the people of Sudan, a chance to build a new Sudan based on peace, equality and justice.
Previous peace deals fell through, and some analysts say the implementation of the current agreement could also be a challenge. South Sudan's government is urging support for Sudan's peace deal implementation from the international community, and so far, the United Nations says it is behind the process. The Sudanese conflict was complex, with many opponents fighting each other and their main rival, the Khartoum government. However, many of the former warring parties now say that's behind them, and the deal is giving hope to many that it's possible to achieve lasting peace in the region. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Let's recap your top stories this hour. The World Health Organization says it hopes to secure 230 million doses of any COVID-19 vaccine specifically for Africa. Only 2 potential vaccines are being tested on the continent. The Global Vaccine Allocation Plan, known as COVAX, aims to help buy and fairly distribute 2 billion doses of vaccines by the end of 2021. Now, officials from the WHO say the initial batch will cover around 20% of the African population. In Beirut, rescue crews are searching through the rubble for possible blast survivors after scanners detected a pulse. Now, this comes a month after the massive explosion at the port that sent shockwaves through the Lebanese capital, killing 191 people. According to the city's governor, sniffer dogs responded to a scent from one of the collapsed buildings. And a United Nations peacekeeping mission has condemned an attack on students sitting final exams in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. A militia group attacked the school and raped some of the girls, forcing 700 students and teachers to flee the school. The government says it's launched an investigation to bring the perpetrators to justice. Well, time now for your business news with Uche.
Thanks, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. African nations urged to weigh the cost versus benefit of credit suspension programs. An outrage in Zimbabwe following the signing of an agreement with white farmers who lost their land.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, involvement of the private sector in debt relief for African nations could prove positive as long as it encourages investment and ensures debt sustainability. In its report, Scope Ratings notes that many nations on the continent are facing an economic shock of historic proportions this year. Now, many of them lack the fiscal space to respond effectively to the COVID-19 pandemic. While initiatives such as the Debt Service Suspension Initiative offer some relief, the report also suggests that these address liquidity rather than solvency issues. The report suggests that governments judge the benefits of participation in such initiatives against the costs. Côte d'Ivoire, Angola and Ethiopia are amongst countries lined up for debt suspension initiatives by the G20, amongst other debtors. Well, let's shift focus now. After the outbreak of COVID-19 in South Africa, the government announced a $30 billion package of health, social, as well as economic distress measures in order to contain the virus and reduce economic damage. But with the emergency response came allegations that funds intended to help the nation were siphoned off by individuals close to ANC politicians. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola taking up that story.
Once it became apparent that corruption and fraud was an issue, President Cyril Ramaphosa acted quickly and instructed the country's law enforcement agencies and the Auditor General's office to investigate.
A lot of the effort that we put into this on the detection side of things has revealed a number of frightening findings that require to be followed up very quickly so that there is no significant passage of time before the required actions are implemented.
The scrutiny and detection work done by the AG's office, which highlighted risks and possible fraud, will now be sent to law enforcement agencies at the Fusion Centre.
And we believe that those people have what it takes. They've got the skills, they've got the tools, and they've got the statutory mandate to take those matters that raised our level of suspicion as an audit office to a next level.
There has already been action taken against senior government officials. This as a report was released. The entire senior management team at the Unemployment Insurance Fund has been suspended.
These moves allow for the SIU to conclude its forensic investigations completely unfettered. The same with our own investigation, which has been recommended by the AG, where we are also involved in forensic investigations.
Most sectors in society want to see rapid action taken against the alleged perpetrators.
We've seen very little consequence. We've yet to see anybody go to jail. We've seen very few of the stolen assets being returned. So that is, for us, is critical.
I think that has got to be properly done, because I suspect there are millions or hundreds of millions of rands that might be at stake. It's not quantified at all in the Auditor General report. But the second thing is, this is an ongoing project, and we've got over 800,000 people who have not been paid, some back to April.
While the first report was pretty damning, that second report, which is due in November, will probably provide more insight and more ammunition for those who are fighting corruption. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's go to Zimbabwe now. There has been outrage in the country after the global compensation deed agreement was signed between the government and former white farmers whose, of course, land was expropriated. Now, some previously resettled black farmers now say it's a reversal of a historic land reform program.
The global compensation deal makes it clear that there will be no compensation for the land itself, but as laid down in the Zimbabwean constitution and law, there will be compensation for improvements, biological assets, and land clearing costs. President Emmerson Mnangagwa said the land reform could not be reversed, but paying of compensation was key to amending ties with the West.
It's taken us 20 years before we've come to this agreement. We have been in negotiations for the last 2 years with government. And I'm happy to say that we've got 95% of the farmers backing us on this compensation side. So it's taken us a long time to get there, and for that I want to thank government and the new dispensation that we finally got to that stage, and we can now put it behind us and we can get on with agriculture.
The Zimbabwean government has said that only foreign white farmers protected by the international investment treaties qualified to retrieve land seized by the government 2 decades ago.
The land
reform program is irreversible. So those that are there ought to follow the law because the land is vested in the state. And that the global compensation deed clearly articulates that. And there's acceptance by both parties that we now need to move to a second stage, which is ensuring that we increase agricultural productivity, we increase production, and we increase profitability so that agriculture becomes a business, so that this country moves its way up into food security territory now into the future.
Agriculture is the mainstay of the Zimbabwean economy, but for over 2 decades, many previously productive farms lay idle with resettled farmers struggling to access capital and mechanization in order to work the land productively. This prompted the government land audit that is the foundation of the ongoing contentious land reforms. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And heading to Nigeria now, a new report from the country's Bureau of Statistics shows that the country's capital inflow has plunged to its lowest level recorded since the 2016 and 2017 recession. The drop has been fueled by the drop in crude oil prices following the coronavirus pandemic and, of course, investors avoiding emerging market assets. Here's Kelechi Emekalam with more.
The dwindling capital inflow is a worrying state for Nigeria's economy. Crashing from $5.85 billion in the first quarter of 2020, it now stands at $1.29 billion, a 77.9% drop. It's the worst the oil-dependent nation has recorded since 2017.
Oil revenue constitutes about 90% of Nigeria's revenue. And so when there was a threat to that particular major revenue base, then it will also affect whatever perception, credit rating of the country. Investors and possible investors, potential investors, watch the credit rating of Nigeria at all times. Nigeria, for the period, started experiencing shortage of foreign currency. And so for investors, for some businesses that wanted to repatriate their funds back to their country, it was the supply of such funds. The supply was not there, and it was difficult for them to repatriate. Investors watch this trend, and when they see that it's difficult for them to repatriate their funds, they are likely to reduce investment into that particular country.
Besides the plunge in global oil prices, the decline in capital inflow is also hobbled by the COVID-19 lockdown, which has led to economic activities grinding to a halt for months, coupled with rising inflation. Besides discouraging foreign investors, the local currency, the naira, is weakening as forex earnings take a hit.
If the continuous decline we're having continues, automatically we'll get into recession by the end of this particular quarter. So it is going to impact negatively on us because the foreign investment that comes into Nigeria actually is a major source for it's another major source for our revenue base and another major source for our foreign exchange base.
Foreign direct investment and portfolio investment also fell by 30.65% and 91.06% respectively. Now the government has been reopening various sectors of the economy. It has also moved to fund the secondary forex market, measures which economic watchers hope could attract more inflows. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, that is all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, one of Switzerland's most profitable firms faces accusations of tax evasion estimated at about $13.4 million in Zimbabwe. We'll seek the details coming up top of the hour. For now, back to Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, we tell you how a Tunisian violinist is adapting to performance disruptions caused by COVID-19.
And a mile away from my house, they stopped me, handed me over a gun and asked me to kill my whole family and all those people.
We were always waiting for being killed every day.
I realized personally that the international community was not going to intervene.
La vie était très dure, c'est vrai, parce que, bon, pour nous, on s'était séparés de nos familles.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We start in Zimbabwe now, where authorities say they have discovered more elephant carcasses, bringing the total number to 22. The elephants are said to have died under mysterious circumstances. However, officials suspect it could be a bacterial infection linked to water scarcity caused by drought. CGTN's Farai Makutoya has more.
An aerial survey done Tuesday in the area between the Hwange National Park and Victoria Falls found more dead elephants. Tests on the carcasses are currently underway.
The preliminary results that we have discovered, there's suspicion that there's a bacteria which has caused the death of our elephants. These things, they normally happen during this time of the year because our elephants are overpopulated. They tend to overgraze or overeat their vegetation. And because if you look at the mortality, the animals which are succumbing, most of them they are young, which in some cases they can't reach for branches up there.
There are also suggestions the animals' resilience may have been compromised due to the strain and stress of having to travel further to find water. The Parks and Wildlife Management Authority had planned a mass translocation of wildlife from arid, dry regions into areas that have more abundant water sources. But all that has been put on hold by the COVID-19 crisis. The failure to move those animals has stoked fears that there could be more fatalities. And it's not just elephants that are in danger. Rising temperatures will dry the land even more in the coming summer months, intensifying the fight for survival.
You know, we have received more than 1,000 distress calls from communities this year alone. And of those 1,000, we have lost 50 lives due to human-wildlife conflict. And 50% of that was human-elephant conflict, which means elephant is becoming the biggest problem because communities will be trying to scare away these animals from their fields, from their small gardens, and generally they are competing for water. And when they compete for water, naturally people will die.
Authorities say they require additional funds to manage the excessive elephant population. They are, however, unlikely to get that from their primary source of revenue, tourism, which is reeling from the COVID-19 crisis. Zimbabwe has previously lobbied to be allowed to export some of its elephants and to trade in ivory to raise funds for conservation. Farai Makutoya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Tunisian violinist Yasmin Azayas is a woman of many talents. She fell in love with the violin at an early age and has now recently launched the African Jasmine Music Project. But the COVID-19 crisis and the anti-epidemic measures that followed interrupted many cultural activities worldwide. And as CGTN's Adnan Chouachi reports, Yasmin remains hopeful that she and other artists from the continent will return to the stage soon.
This cultural initiative aims to bring together musicians, singers and artists from different African nations.
And I was so inspired by all the rhythms, all the really cool bass lines, all the influences from all over Africa, and it was just so inspiring. So I decided to see how I can make my own vision of African music, which was by trying to incorporate different influences from many countries in Africa. For example, I fused a lot of Guinean music with music from Mali. I ended up fusing music from Senegal with music from like Sudan.
Yasmin Azayas is trying to modernize traditional African music by using modern and old instruments.
I really enjoyed making it. It just felt like such a liberating feeling to play something that was kind of different and new, and especially the fact that it's with the violin, which I think is quite rare with this kind of music, unless they're using their traditional string instruments. So that was really fun, and trying to modernize it in a way that people could dance to it.
The artist likes to mix Tunisian and other African music as a statement against racism in the continent.
The message of a lot of my lyrics are about freedom, are about racism, are about Africa as a unit, not every country being completely separate. So I wanted to really bring together all of our nationalities, all of our influences, and all of the backgrounds, and make like a really interesting fusion of all of those sounds.
Stop these prejudices. I've been to East and West, seen the North and South. Africa was best.
In the African Jasmine Music Project, Yasmin sings in English, French and Arabic, while other singers perform in different local and regional languages. The Tunisian violin prodigy says that music can break all cultural barriers in Africa and the world. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Up next. 2010 World Cup